back to 1986 and talk about Parting Glances, written and directed by Bill Sherwood. It stars Richard Gunung, I don't know how to pronounce that name, John Bolger, and Steve Buscemi, who is in one of the first roles ever. He looks like a baby in this movie. I never thought that Steve Buscemi could look anything but old. David, could you give us a quick synopsis of the plot?
Sure. The film is about a young gay Upper West Side couple. I think they've been together for maybe 6 months. It's a short time. And one of the boyfriends, he's anthropologist, something like this, and he's been offered a position in Africa. So he makes the decision that he's going to leave for this 2-year gig, and even though the relationship is very fresh, the film is in part about that tension. It's also about Steve Buscemi, who has AIDS, and the film dealing with his friendship and his ex-lover with the other relationship, and how they still have to manage that relationship. So it deals with those multiple angles.
Wasn't one of the first films to deal with HIV/AIDS?
Well, I was
certainly one of the first mainstream films, one of the first feature films.
The one thing that's striking to me, I was mentioning to Nathan earlier, is that it never mentions the word AIDS in the film, however.
No, in fact, Betty says, one of the characters, the men in this town have become so proper, and I'm assuming that that's a reference to how AIDS has changed things for gay men. Yeah. And why do you think he didn't include that? I mean, it was all over the newspapers, 1986.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know, it's interesting. I haven't seen the movie in several years.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it had a pretty strong impact on me. I encountered it as a teenager.
Yeah.
And to me, this was a movie about AIDS, really. And it's interesting, you having seen it recently and realize that they don't actually speak of it. I mean, the whole movie, that's all I sort of recall of the film, was that it was the first and remains one of the best sort of movies to deal with.
And I think
that maybe Ronald Reagan helped write the script, because he never mentioned the word AIDS, and he was president at the time.
And it's also, I guess it's right before ACT UP really takes hold of a consciousness. So maybe that's not part of the idea. I don't know exactly.
But there's another side of this. This is a film that says that gay men are just like you and me, us heterosexual people. They've been in this relationship. They're rather straight-laced. We know that they're intellectuals from the very start, because Michael is reading Naipaul's The Bend in the River. They enter their apartment, and there are these Rothko posters on the wall. Later, there are references to Vermeer and Proust, just like any heterosexual.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what's refreshing about this movie compared to Boys in the Band, where everyone is agonizing over their homosexuality, you know, in every other scene. In Parting Glances, it's just, you're just sort of dropped into this world, and the characters are sort of allowed to live in that world, and we sort of get to peek in on them. And there isn't a lot of, it's not a position paper. There's not a lot of, soul searching about the nature of being gay and, all these sort of burdens. It handles it a little more lightly.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think it's one of the reasons why the film was critiqued. Again, another thing we were talking about earlier is that, a gay audience is one of the most difficult audience to please about what it is that we're seeing. What's a positive, what's a negative image? And Parting Glances was critiqued for being, Upper West Side, white middle-class boys who went to Columbia, and well, where's everybody else, right? And for me, I'm almost thinking when I was watching Boys in the Band, at least there was, this black character in there. There was a dynamic with not just middle class. There was the struggle with middle classness, actually, and Parting Glances just presumes this middle classness.
Yeah, I mean, here we have two of the signature sort of gay films, Boys in the Band and Parting Glances, about well-to-do, educated New York, largely white men having parties. So I don't know. I mean, the gays love a party. I don't know.
And that's all we do.
But there's code. There's still this code. He's going to Africa, and everybody knew that Africa was where AIDS was most rampant. So that was another real issue. But I was interested in Steve Buscemi being in this film, because there was a fear with Boys in the Band that if a straight actor played a gay, that he would be typecast the rest of his life. And Steve Buscemi's career has been pretty good, despite the fact that he played this gay character who had AIDS, or whatever it was that he had.
Yeah, and I think some of that probably had to do with the independent nature of the film, and that Buscemi, I think, comes out of that culture of the indies, and that those films were seen as important stepping stones. And when you look at Buscemi's career, I mean, he's worked with, you know, indie to quasi-indie filmmakers, so he's kind of maintained that position, you know, so it's, it kind of fits. There's a trajectory you can see with Buscemi from that film to even stuff in The Sopranos, right? It's kind of got that indie kind of feel.
Maybe we should watch a little clip.
And it was my own fault, all right? Because it wasn't. And if you do, I'm gonna come back and haunt you, all right? All right, now, for this money thing. Okay, Dad, you get 10,000, okay? That ought to buy you a nice weekend in Atlantic City. Michael gets 50, and Joan and Terry get 20 each, and the rest goes to GMHC for care for poor people with AIDS and not to medical research, because if the feds could spend $1 trillion on bombs, then they could spend a little on research, right? Right. But you didn't think this kid from Bensonhurst had so much stashed away, did you? Ha ha ha.